Hey there, girly pups. Hope you're having a good Pawtism Awareness Month. And speaking of autists, I never actually announced I was making this show a bi-weekly thing, did I? It just sort of happened after the first 2 months of 2026 were a subjective decade and my partners forced me to take a modicum of care for myself. That's my excuse for filming from the dog bed this episode, and I'm sticking with it. So, hey, this is now a bi-weekly show, and I'm using the extra time to make slightly more diverse videos. Like that review of Autumn Wolf's latest Romantasy last week, I've got like 3 videos in various stages of the writing, recording, and editing process. More stream highlights. Oh, and working a shock collar into my regular streams on Twitch, and I guess maybe YouTube and TikTok if one of my girlfriends gets her way. So that should make those highlights more exciting.
You poor thing.
How'd you spend your morning, Rose? I played a video game while collared leash and getting zapped. I'm living the fucking dream.
And welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Phenn. Now let's get to some news. I'm gonna open obedience training, the segment focusing on political, legislative, judicial, and military news because, well, the whole field's been a complete fluffing mess. Well, nearly my entire life, but the last few weeks were particularly something. Where do I even begin? Last episode, Noem had just been fired from the Trump administration, supposedly for doing the exact things Trump demanded of her, while garnering the expected response from everyone not suckling on Trump's carcinogenic teat. I suppose that's what happens when your brain is cooked by sycophantic supplicants into thinking you're actually popular rather than the latest in a chain of patriarchal fascists riding incremental waves of regulatory and legislative capture and collapse. But since then, one of the only other prominent women in the administration, coincidentally also known for obscene child and dog-directed cruelty, why is this a running theme? Pam Bondi, the wildly incompetent, openly corrupt, and incredibly loyal, now former Attorney General, has also been fired, officially ending Trump 2.0's tacit no scalps policy. Worse news for the remaining cabinet members and political appointees, as besides Levitt, already in hot water for an unflattering picture and her consistent inability to fend off the pathetic nips of the beaten pups in the White House press corps, there simply aren't that many women left to take one for the boys. Naturally, that places the few non-white men in the administration in similarly dire straits, with Kash Patel, the failed podcaster currently destroying the FBI, teed up as another likely target. I mean, who wouldn't want a dude who uses FBI resources to join a frat party with the sexist and racist dicks on the U.S. men's hockey team, who gave illegal ghost guns to Audi Rowan officials to announce an FBI office the locals had not been made aware of, who allegedly falsely claimed to have caught Charlie Kirk's shooter on Twitter, so as to, again, allegedly get a seat at one of the most exclusive restaurants in New York City, who tweeted a picture of a rifle clip where a single bullet had been scribbled with anti-ice in blue ballpoint pen ink after a shooting which notably left only ICE prisoners dead, would have maybe been a bad idea. Late addition to this, actually, apparently the bullet which killed Girk is failing to match up with the alleged shooter's weapon. So that's fun. The current conspiracy theory thing the right-wingers are trying to push is that his bones were so thick they shattered the... Yes, really, I wish I was kidding. Honestly, I'll be sad to see Kash Patel go, because, let's be honest, it's kind of inevitable. But no, I do really mean that. He's a corrupt, sniveling little toady. But if you gave him Noem's former job, I'd bet dollars to dog treats the entire department would be functionally gutted, and he and Stephen Miller would have pulled a Dick Cheney within the first month. By that I do mean attempted to shoot each other and totally blamed it on a hunting trip, but I feel like they'd do it dumber? I don't know how, just somehow. Faster if this partial shutdown was still going on in said hypothetical super hell, but then this is the way it was always going to go. Fascists are unpopular, especially with each other. They've always been like this. That's why the 1,000-year Reich fell apart in 12. Sure, the brown shirts you're paying love it, because they get to exert the control over lesser beings. Patriarchy is always promised them, but which reality, as well as mildly progressive policies of equity and equality, denied. But those men are the minority, even among men. Hell, even among agents of the government and wannabe brown shirts. Yeah, ICE agents are being paid to kill, rape, and torture minorities, and loving it. But the security theater of the TSA, agents charged with merely groping, sexually assaulting, and otherwise tormenting trans folks, women, non-white folks, in a disgustingly socially acceptable manner under the auspices of national security, are going without pay. Soldiers are losing housing deals. They and their families are losing commissary and grocery allowances for more expensive buffet-style cafeterias, while often going unpaid or paid for the wrong amounts themselves. Hell, on the anniversary of Trump's first round of tariffs, now declared illegal by the Supreme Court, who've otherwise supported him in perfect lockstep, Trump pushed a new 100% tariff on all imported medication in an act which will kill thousands. But don't worry, as he said... You know, he's said so many utterly vile things since I wrote that line. It's been maybe 2 days. I forgot which specifically vile clip I wanted to cut to there, so I'm just gonna have that inhumanly racist, Islamophobic, murderous Truth Social post from Easter slowly fade in here. So yeah, the war is going great. That's why Iran is now in their most economically powerful position in living memory. That's why $40,000 drones are shooting down F-15 Eagles that cost on average $100 million each, and why one of the only 17 AWACS radar planes, worth about $500 million, which enable US F-35s to fly without radar, is now a smoking wreck on the tarmac. And if the Nazi comparisons weren't strong enough, Israel has been using the war as cover for their Greater Israel expansion plans, namely, invading southern Lebanon and immediately instituting ethnic cleansing of the Muslim population. Mere days after its legislature, bedecked in literal golden noose lapel pins, because apparently no one pointed out that was fucking evil, ordered the execution by hanging of Palestinian prisoners as a new standing policy. Look, there's not much I, as a singular individual, much less a trans woman whom this administration would love to see raped to death in prison, can do about any of these things. There's not much you, dear listener, can do on your own either. But there is so much we can do if we work together. No, those huge No Kings protests last week didn't do anything on their own, and their organizers, indivisible, are neoliberal reactionaries like most Democrats, when they're not actually just fascists playing pretend. But those protests, and others like them, are a great place to find your local organizations who are actually doing something, organizing protests with actual actionable demands. Yes, I'm calling out the fact that national strike request has no demands, which if you don't offer demands, they can't meet them, you dumbasses. Antagonizing elected officials until they actually do their jobs, be that following the will and interest of the people who voted for them, or demanding they use their authority to see those men and women who've caused so much harm actually face consequences. That's why, despite how blisteringly stupid this administration is, I can't not cover it. I'm good at finding information and drawing connections and then sharing those with others. I'm a trans woman. I'm also used to tanking psychic damage. Now I just get to do it for others instead of myself. Plus, I know how to balance it out better now, mostly. I only ask that you please remember those of us doing exactly that. I don't just mean by supporting me and others through Patreon or Ko-fi, or by liking and subscribing to their channels or newsletters or whatever, but also, yes, that please, yes. But remember us when it comes to shit like the IOC sex testing. Yes, it will have negative knock-on effects on cis women. That sucks. It's awful. But speak up and remind others that while the scattershot harm is assuredly a bonus to those misogynistic turfy shits, the point was to remind trans women we are not allowed to compete in sports like anyone else, to exist in public like anyone else. and those pointing out the harm it will do only to cis women, especially by highlighting how few trans women it will actually affect. Congratulations, you're reinforcing that job for them. Why are you doing that? We just want to live our lives just like you. But every time something like this happens, the IOC, the Girl Guides, the Women's Institute, our fucking healthcare, we're expected to shut up and deal because everyone knows it would only be really bad if the thing being done to us will affect someone else too. Hell, the case about children's trans healthcare here in Denver literally included Judge Engelert admitting Children's Hospital Colorado is breaking the state's anti-discrimination law, admitted as much while saying his court does not condone a violation of any law, before allowing the hospital to continue violating the same law even after a federal court struck down Brainworm Bobby Kennedy's illegal and scientifically bullshit anti-trans orders because it would because it might negatively affect the public interest because apparently trans children do not count as members of the public interest. Having vented all of my vitriolic piss, okay, let's be honest here, most of it. Let's get into some of the less asinine? Less painful. Yeah, less painful sounds better. Less painful stories of this segment. So back in March, y'all probably heard about the Nexstar acquisition of Tegna, and unless you're quite well informed or work in the industries of broadcast television, or I don't know, you remember that Nexstar was one of the syndication networks which pulled Jimmy Kimmel's show even after he'd been unfired, that likely meant fairly little to you. Well, Coles notes, they're both massive broadcast TV syndication networks. One assuredly runs some amount of your local and semi-local programming, and while their merger was approved by the FCC is also run by Trump's little censorial crony, Brendan Carr, who's been gleefully turning the agency's enforcement arm against Trump's detractors while ignoring actual violations. Oh, say like how the Nexstar acquisition of Tegna puts it well over owning 39% of TV broadcasting in the country, even adjusting for the cute legal loophole they'd already been using to get around congressionally set antitrust limits. Nexstar has, naturally, already claimed the acquisition is so far in it can't be undone, but hey, fun fact, that's not true. Both the FCC and the FTC have undone fully complete mergers before. One of the most famous instances being the 1982 Sherman antitrust ruling, which shattered AT&T, who held a functionally complete monopoly on US telecommunications, into 7 regional holding companies. The fact that they were regional and therefore had effective local monopolies did birth the modern non-competitive but technically non-monopoly telecom environment, but that's a flaw in the methodology of the shattering, not in the use of antitrust laws and their power to disperse companies. This, like any other merger, acquisition, or business transaction, can absolutely be undone. If you believe in the rule of law, it's literally what the law says. If you're an anarchist who understands that civilization is nothing more than a general agreement to work together for the benefit of the collective good, well then, hey, you already know words and dollar signs on paper only have as much power as you allow them to have. Look, I could have thrown in something about how Pritzker, a billionaire who could solve nearly every issue facing Chicagoans, the people of Illinois, well, and damn near the entire country without even denting his own personal unconscionable wealth, whose state police brutalized and arrested protesters at the Broadview facility while allowing ICE to murder Silverio Vilgas Gonzalez without consequences, whose lip service to trans people does nothing as Chicago hospitals deny trans children health care, and the Catholic Church, controllers of 28% of Illinois hospital beds and much larger percentages in states across the country, deny healthcare to trans adults, started pushing the same anti-queer censorship bullshit that fascist doppelganger Gavin Trump 3.0 Newsom has been pushing right after Pritzker started dropping quotes Obama made in 2006, but I've already said all I need to say about him in, well, that episode. No, my last obedience training story is about this headline you probably saw. It's one of those funny headlines that sounds good until you really start to process it. It's the right energy, gently understanding the real power of society lies with the masses, that despite their hoarding of inhumane quantities of wealth, they are still mortal and live lives of comfort and indolence off our labor only so long as we are sufficiently scared or comfortable as to not chafe against that incongruity. But when you look closer, it's a slap in the face. A statement of exactly how little the oligarchs think of the individual people whose work they exploit. Five Guys operates 1,900 restaurants across the planet, with approximately 1,500 based here in the United States. Generously, that means $1,000 per store. I'll again be kind and assume each store is running only 12 hours each day with 2 full-time 4-person teams plus a single manager and assistant manager. Instead of the likely dozen and change or so folks, they likely actually have working sub 32 hours a week whenever possible to avoid providing them healthcare. That's only $100 per employee. According to Technomics estimates, in 2023, Five Guys stores in the US alone made $2.347 billion in revenue. I can't stress this enough. This dude gave his US staff a bonus worth less than a single % of the revenue they generated for him, and then told them split it at least 150,000 ways. To be precise, that entire $1.5 million isn't even 0.5% of the revenue they generated, but 0.064% of what their labor made the multinational company. This is not a genuine understanding of the sheer weight of human capital this man draws his wealth from. This is a marketing ploy which should be seen as the executive piss trickle-down it actually is. Ooh, executives taking the piss is kind of the perfect segue into Hound's Byte, our tech news segment. I mean, hell, the AI bubble keeps revealing new bright red glowing weak points, data center contracts aren't being fulfilled, RAM orders are being ignored, the shutdown of Sora, which I fluffing called! But no, let's start with the weirdest one. On April 2nd, the Trump administration, through the medium of the Commodity Future Trading Commission, the CFTC, sued Arizona, Connecticut, and Illinois for enforcing state law on several prediction markets, including Kalshi, Polymarket, Crypto.com, and Robinhood. Yeah, let me say that again, in case your brain skipped a beat, because fair. The Republican-controlled federal government, the party supposedly of states' rights, but we all know that's been bullshit forever, is suing 3 states for requiring several major Trump donors to follow state laws. Extra fun fact, 2 of those states haven't even had time to do more than issue cease and desist orders to the unlicensed, untaxed, insider trading strewn, ethical nightmare casinos, which lack even the decency to pretend they're merely the life-ruining sports betting apps we've all become so inundated to. Though Arizona has filed criminal charges against Kalshi for violating state gambling laws. I have to say it at least once a show, so let's be honest here. Prediction markets, like crypto, like NFTs, like generative AI, are things we do not need or even really want. They're the inventions of the wealthy and powerful to turn all aspects of human existence into securities which can be sold, traded, and gambled on. Their purpose is not to improve anything for anyone, but to turn profit for their creators by entrenching a market they outright control into everyone's lives, while also commodifying all aspects of the human experience. I must have a story in here that's just sort of banal, right? Ooh, how about the official White House app, only available on Android for reasons which will become apparent quickly, I'm sure. I'll link to the blog who's done most of the work of compiling it for those who are more coding savvy than I, but let me at least provide the highlights. The US government is injecting JavaScript into any site visited with its new Only Real News app, which strips out any login requirements, paywalls, and the like. Yay! But also cookie consent and GDPR banners. Less yay. It has GPS tracking systems intended to ping and as accurate as possible location data from your phone every 4.5 and 9.5 minutes. To load YouTube videos, it's pulling JavaScript from some dude's GitHub page? Does Lonely CPP work for the federal government? Who knows? But here's hoping the account is never compromised or, already owned by someone with misgivings about anything? It's shit, likely dangerous, and an active security hazard, but you probably don't need me to tell you that. It's an app published by the Trump administration. It's basically a miracle. It's only trying to track you constantly instead of actively mining crypto in the background at the same time. Ooh, you know what other story is, well, not banal, more like just garden variety corruption and bribery? That's still better than planet and humanity destroying AI, right? Last week, the FCC officially banned all internationally made routers, which is to say, basically all routers, as very little, well, if any, but especially if electronic manufacturing is done here in the United States. But don't worry, your router is fine. The FCC can only block new ones from being sold, even if they're using the Trump 2.0 bullshit excuse of a sudden national security concern to do it. I can't wait to see them try and justify this one in court. The last time they used this excuse, they claimed wind farms in the Atlantic would provide radar cover for a great ocean-covering drone swarm, which is both not how radar interacts with wind farms and just a straight-up lie. But no, the Trump FCC didn't just ban effectively all but Elon Musk-controlled Starlink routers. They also created a path for conditional approval, which we've all just kind of accepted as you can pay him and he'll let your stuff in. So, I guess that'll be a thing. No one's currently approved yet, so I guess here's hoping you don't need to replace your router anytime soon. Especially when the final story of this Hound's Byte is yet another less than fun first, within my lifetime at least. The consoles are getting more expensive, specifically the PlayStation, but I personally wouldn't count out Microsoft potentially following suit. While RAM prices dipped to only obscene levels from their height of trading a kidney for a few sticks of DDR5 is actually a really good deal, after OpenAI failed to pay for one of their massive RAM pre-orders, most PC and electronic hardware is still spoken for due to the delights of just-in-time production. No, the real irony in this is not that for the first console generation I can recall, the hardware is getting more expensive in what was supposed to be the last year before its subsequent generation launches, but that Sony and Microsoft are acting like the public will have the money to afford $1,000 consoles in the next 2 years, even assuming they can get the parts to sell them at that scale. I remember the launch of the PS5. They weren't accessible then. Why would this one be different? I don't think I've even dragged $400 worth of enjoyment out of my PS5. I'm not sure I'd bet the PS6 would be worth it at all. Take this one as an example. How long do you think it's going to take Rockstar to bother porting GTA 6 to the PS6, since they currently somehow dissociated again from reality, expect it to make them $7.6 billion in its first 2 months on the PS5, PC, and whatever the current version of the Xbox is called alone. I mean, it only took them 1.5 years to port GTA 5 after the current consoles released in 2020. We'll see. Not that it really matters to me, honestly. I can't think of the last Xbox or PlayStation exclusive I simply had to try, which didn't also run fine on my PC. Personally, I've been messing around with more indie games, goofy stuff I missed out on from the PS2 and GameCube era, and staring lustily at Pocopia and maybe Marathon? That's almost a natural segue into pet play. It would be ruder not to take it, right? Yes, pet play, my cultural, gaming, and general media / catch-all segment I normally reserve for the end of the show, but this time not, because the vet visit stories are mostly not buzzkills. Unfortunately, the offset is several of the pet play stories kinda are. Like, remember how Epic laid off more than 1,000 people, like, a week and a bit ago, blaming a mild downturn in Fortnite's revenue? Well, since that rather blasé announcement, more just keeps coming to light, like how the cuts weren't even to low-level devs, much less the highly paid vacuoles occupying executive chairs, but creative leads. Robbie Williams, the longtime producer of Fortnite, was seemingly just as blindsided by the layoffs as anyone, taking to X to say, "What comes next is very hard and painful. Our teams will have to pick up the pieces and try to keep moving forward, but we cannot fully understand what kind of impacts this will have on the game for the rest of the year and likely beyond. I'll continue to do my best to keep making the best game for you, and I'm confident that my peers feel the same, but please be patient with us as we navigate this tough time and do our best in spite of these truly gut-wrenching losses." Epic CEO Tim Sweeney thought it was in his best interest as a man whose personal wealth amounts to $5.1 billion, or about half a week of Trump's Iran war, who could have continued paying every single person's salary and benefits out of his own wealth for decades without even noticing a dip, decided to take to X himself and hype up the people he just fired. Look, I know we have to talk about video game layoffs a lot, but when John Romero is telling VGC about how much the current industry reminds him of the lead-in to the 1983 video game crash, when more than 1/3 of game industry workers have been laid off in the last 2 years, when many of those developers, writers, animators, and producers are not returning to the industry which just abandoned them. What we're going to have, best case, assuming there isn't a crash, is massive loss of institutional knowledge. But that's the goal of generative AI and tech gentry, especially high-level CEOs like Tim Sweeney, to replace that spark of humanity, the creative drive, with something expected, something consistently amortizable. If you haven't read it, I recommend Ella Bambust's, or Ella Maxima, she goes by both pen names, mess with me, leave me alone, review of Crimson Desert to see what I mean on the scale of a single game, link in the description. And that's before we address the abject cruelty inherent in the USian healthcare system, where Epic boss Tim Sweeney can fire 1,000 people who he, again, could continue paying himself out of his personal $1.5 billion, including Mike Prink, a programmer who'd been working on Fortnite for more than 7 years and who has terminal brain cancer. Bad enough his health insurance is only being carried on by Epic's largesse, extending health benefits for a further 6 months from termination. They also outright killed his life insurance, which his wife was going to use to pay for things like his funeral, knowing full well he can now never get another life insurance policy because he has a pre-existing condition of terminal brain cancer. Yes, since being yelled at, Sweeney has promised, nebulously, to make it right. But again, he did this. He caused this. He does not get credit for undoing an iota of the harm he chose to cause because it would increase the size of his already vile portfolio. None of these devs needed to be fired. Epic, nor Fortnite, nor even the Unreal Engine itself or any aspect of this industry will be improved for their lack. I'm also just going to point out, the whole thing about Disney trying to buy Epic, like, what weird fucking shitty timing, too. Just, why? What? I wasn't honestly sure I was going to write about the Arc Raiders thing, calling Gen AI use in the game a Trojan horse as though it's a compliment. Well, it seems sort of mean to dig into, because it's kind of already a cell phone. But then, I read the actual presentation script and documents where Nexon president and CEO Jung-Hon Lee made that blisteringly, absurdly stupid statement, and, well, now, I just had to cover it, because this Eurogamer article makes it sound sensible when it's actually just AI slop. Like, it's the same thing the New York Times did to, well, that Trump Truth Social post. It's almost like they're all playing cover for fascists. Oh, that's a perfect time for the cat to start hacking something up. I mean it. Whole sections of the script, that bit included, bear the telltale signs of AI generation. Hell, the header of that page even looks AI generated. Like, okay, look, here. What's with this word cloud thing feeding into Monolake? Why these terms? Why do few, if any of them, even appear in the script? Why is Monolake double labeled on every header it's mentioned in? Why are these dots the wrong color outputs? Why are they even here? Why is the kerning and spacing different in all three outputs? Why is development in all three of them? Why are the first and last ones Bizarro World clones of each other? I'm not even going to bother reading this page out loud because no one bothered to write it, and personally, I feel like if I was an investor in this, I'd be insulted. I will, however, go over a few of the GenAI artifacts. No, it doesn't look like GenAI slop because it uses M dashes or the Oxford comma. Stop it. Stop spreading shit like that. The Azathoth Ex Machina slot machines use those tools, often incorrectly, because they have been trained on the stolen works of English authors the world over, and we love using those tools correctly or in unexpected ways to convey meaning and interest our readers. Back in January, I picked apart these two then current slop images to help teach folks some key tells to look for. Link up there if you want to go check it out. But with text, at least text not generated by an image generation LLM, which tends to be screwed up in different ways, see again that video, is to look for a confluence of tells. First, this rhetorical gimmick is absurdly common to LLMs. This thing about the subject isn't what the audience assumes it is. This isn't about X, it's about Y, or in this case, beyond X arc raiders is also Y. It's a fairly standard rhetorical device, one might even call it trite and played out at this point, but its common use in GenAI slop is due to the other primary training data source they've been fed on, Reddit posts, where you've assuredly seen this out in the wild. But GenAI doesn't think or plan or even really respond to things. It throws together the most likely response according to its training data. And since a lot of that is from Redditors looking to either seem smart by not directly antagonizing someone they're responding to, or looking to flatter the person they're responding to into not noticing that they are being corrected, this tool is all over their training data. So here's the big obvious confluence to look at for this example. Common generative AI rhetorical tool, X is not just X but also Y, where in this case, Y is arc raiders being a Trojan horse, followed by a clarification using an M dash where a comma would have been generally more reasonable and expected, and where the clarification both runs counter to the meaning of Y, Trojan horse in this case, and doesn't make any damn sense on its own because it's just a bunch of words thrown together in, well, management standard English. Oh, and this line, which I also need to call out, because this is page 60 of a 77-page document, and in this line, it reads, well, technically, CEO of Nexon said specifically, "Our methodology doesn't replace creative people. It frees them to create with context." There's a whole obsession about context, but it's a buzzword. Context has now become a buzzword. I'm sorry to tell you this. Weird then that 44 pages earlier, said by Embark's CEO, co-founder, or is it just founder after the other was fired for allegedly sexually harassing a final streamer, who felt she couldn't come forward with the harassment lest she lose her livelihood, and dude who's been named Nexon's new executive chairman. Wonder if that had anything to do with South Korean FTC raiding Nexon's HQ for alleged gambling / gotcha rate fixing in MapleStory Idol last month. Probably not, but I think you should still know about it. Patrick Sunderland had this to say: 2 games built with significantly fewer people at a fraction of the cost you'd expect for a AAA game. Like, sure, he technically didn't fire anyone and replace them with AI. Instead, he just spun his team off from EA, where Sunderland had previously complained his teams were too large. God, what a delightful problem to have. And started with a bare-bones team in 2021, using slop generation machines to fill in the gaps, and made a game everyone, including him, admits gets better every time they replace some of the slop with human-created things. Look, There's a lot of vitriol this week, so let me take a quick break to spotlight a few good things. Namely, 3 fanzines releasing soon and which I happened to stumble upon in like the past couple of days, really. I've mentioned the Digigirl zine a time or two on this show. They were holding applications for Volume 4 to be released this coming August, back in January. Well, at least a few of the veterans from the Digigirl zine are also appearing in the Legends of Iliad zine later this month. I should have a visual going here with a bunch of the preview images they've shared, but if you'd like to see more gorgeous art of the Iliad digital world, that's specifically the Greco-inspired version of the digital world from the Time Stranger game, keep an eye on this Blue Sky account. For my Mexploitation girly pups, there's Records Analysis, an Armored Core fanzine with pre-orders up until the 7th of April. Yeah, sorry, I caught this one real late. Hey, editing Phenn here. Yeah, no camera this time. The sun isn't even up yet here on the 8th, so I sort of know this is going up after the 7th. The pre-orders are now closed and the full thing doesn't come out until June, so I guess this is more of a, hey, keep an eye on these folks, they do good work sort of deal now. Sorry, I was not on my speediest editing game, waiting to see if the fascist running my country would actually do as he said and murder an entire civilization. While Armored Core isn't my favorite Mexploitation personally, don't get me wrong, it's great, but trans authors like Ella Maxima and Calidora Rowe have set my personal watermark so high even FromSoft is still trying to catch up. The previews they've shown are so stunning, I may have already snatched up a physical pre-order for myself. Lastly, I also happened to stumble across this fanzine launching later this year for Atlantis, the Lost Empire's 25th anniversary. Fun fact, I grew up in Burbank, California, the city where Disney, WB, and, well, okay, basically all the big studios are actually based. Hollywood used to be cheap to rent space for running auditions, but no one actually wanted to have their studios there. Don't worry. That's why I have original art of, well, here. Gonna knock down my own studio. It's fine. It's just a woodcut or wood burn that a community member did. It's great. But that's why I have original art done by Bill Justice for My Old Man after he reported on Disney's abusive labor practices, as well as original Yosemite Sam and SpongeBob animation cells. They were just kind of around when I was growing up. That's also why I was convinced for the longest time that I saw Atlantis before it came out in 2001, because I had sort of bits of it. Growing up in Burbank, I was also a child actor because, again, kind of everyone was, especially if my dad was an actor, so it was just easier. Which is why I have the dubious honor of being, to my knowledge, the only trans woman in the 2011 Super Bowl commercial, which launched Dove's men's care line. If you've seen the commercial, that gets even more surreally funny. I was also in a few Disney Channel seasonal bumpers around 1999 or 2000. Yes, I was worried they'd show up in that Defunct Land video after I heard Kevin Perjurer was hunting the Disney Channel theme. No, they did not show up, and I am so happy. The key detail being, while I don't remember where those were filmed specifically. What do you want from me? I was like 7 at most. I do recall we entered through the Sorcerer's Hat down to some animation department's reception area, complete with concept art of the Leviathan and the pre-fall Magitech Atlantean civilization. Was that a humble brag? I was going for an explanation of why I'm really excited for a fanzine celebrating a cult classic Disney movie I happen to have a personal connection with, and which I feel is dissociated enough from Disney, the evil supporting genocide company, that I feel okay expressing interest, but I fear it may have come across as a humble brag, so apologies if so. Also, I think I'm just have a story that's funny to laugh at? Sure. The final bit of pet play news this week is actually a little ironic, as that term is banned from Fuckboy's website. Leonid Radinsky, the OnlyFans owner, has died this last week or so. No, I don't even care enough to terribly check specifically when. He was 40-something. All this mutt can say is, hooray, dude sucked. Pro tip, if you don't want people to celebrate your timely or untimely demise, don't suck. Don't build up a website on the back of independent sex workers, then throw them to the fucking wolves the second they're making you billions. Lest I give you the wrong impression, he was shit for exploiting sex workers. Not as many shitlibs will say then and now, for the creation of OnlyFans itself. First, because he didn't create it, he bought in later. Second, because if you actually listen to sex workers, which I know it's hard, but come on, just talk to them like people. That's all you have to do. Nearly everyone will tell you they enjoy the job, but want it to be decriminalized, not legalized, as that will make it easier and safer for them to do, unlike the Nordic model pushed by, well, everyone who isn't actually a sex worker, including Leonid while he was alive. Let's be honest, most of this can be summed up as give a shit about other people and you'll live a more fulfilling life and not see your grave turned into the next public all-genders toilet. In my head, this story made sense as a lead-in to vet visits and sex work, death. That scans. Yeah, that scans to go into the science and medicine segment. But he was just a shitty billionaire asshole who built his fortune off the backs of sex workers. There wasn't any of that... I mean, anything that interesting about him? Or have any association with that himself? I mean, I guess I could make a joke about the fact that despite being so awful, he still instituted a better revenue split than Twitch has. Yeah, no, I could not figure out a better transition between that last story and vet visit. But we're here now, so deal. As a rule, I try not to cover food-related stories. I worked in the culinary industry for a decade. I have a degree focusing on food service and hospitality law and business practices, and spent time working in food manufacturing on the QA side. I know intimately where the line of food safety is in this country and make a point of trying to forget as often as possible, lest I go mad. Well, more mad. And yet, this episode's vet visit contains, in its entirety, 2 food-related stories. Good news, only one of them is dangerous. The other is merely funny, until a British bigot tried to inexplicably blame trans people for it. Then again, I suppose that's still funny, it's just funny yikes, rather than funny haha? I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that y'all have probably heard about the Great Easter Theft of 12 tons of KitKats, right? I know that sounds really impressive, but we are, just to make it abundantly clear, talking about a single truck which vanished between the production facility in Italy and the distribution center in Poland. And also, it's kind of weird that since the whole truck has vanished, no one has questioned, hey, did the driver steal it? And if not, are they okay? I hear you already asking, where's the funny part, funny mutt? Okay, so here's the this might also be a funny yikes one, but still. Nestle, a multinational company whose chocolate is produced in no small part by child slave labor, that is not an exaggeration, who specializes in slurping up water rights so populations have no choice but to pay through the nose for Nestle's water, which they're then selling back to them, while funding anti-breastfeeding campaigns to convince those same populations that Nestle's formula, last recalled for toxins only 2 months ago, is the only safe option for their children, requiring they pay for both the water and the formula, had the putrescent, necrotized testicles to set up a website where folks may enter a series of numbers from a random KitKat's barcode to tell if it's one of the stolen ones and automatically report it. Yes, they want you to do the work of finding their slave labor-made chocolate for them, or you could just eat the KitKat and never think about it again. Or, I suppose you could emulate Liz Truss, the shortest-lived British Prime Minister in history, most famous for being so short-lived, folks honestly forget Elizabeth II survived World War II, the beginnings of COVID, the first Trump presidency, all to only perish 2 days after swearing Truss in. She's now a conservative YouTuber. Apparently the politician career didn't pan out, and that's just what happens to them now. And has started suggesting the KitKats were stolen by an underground trans mafia. So, is it going too far to say that her choice of the word mafia is just her racism showing? Or does reminding you that she was a conservative British prime minister do that on its own? Personally, if you saw someone stealing food, no, you fucking didn't. I've been editing this episode for... Why am I still wearing these headphones? I've been editing this episode for like 2 or 3 days. I have been editing this episode so long that when I started, Trump had just made that Easter post, and now I think we're like 2-ish hours away from when he might nuke Iran. Anyway, in that intervening time, this story that I'm about to do actually updated, so it's not a thing anymore. Look, the health alert, I know it's not a recall. Look, I made jokes about it, but it's not really a recall. The health alert has been taken off, which normally I actually wouldn't put that much stock in if it was just the federal government, but it was both the federal government and actually the state government of New York working jointly to establish that no, there was not lead in these dino chicken nuggies. They are just, there was a false positive, essentially. If it weren't for the whole New York City New York City's own food safety body weighing in, stop licking your bit. Weighing in, I probably wouldn't have necessarily felt the need to update this, but just because it did. Yeah, that's a lot more reasonable than just the federal government who can't fucking be trusted lately. Yeah. Also, yes, this is just what I've been this helps me concentrate. You figure it out. Apparently, it's just a semi-common autistic thing of like head pressure make focus better. But my period started on what the hell is today? Sunday, and therefore everything sucks. So this is the closest to normal clothing that I can handle, touching my skin, and I get cold, but not that cold. So I have a shrug. I know it's silly. Shush. Yeah, the dino nuggies are not dangerous, though they've already told people to throw them out, so I guess if you find them dumpster diving, you won't be too worried about them, but you probably still should, since they definitely haven't been held at a food-safe temperature. You do you, but hey, they don't have unsafe levels of lead, which is to say any amount of lead. Here, I'll throw you back to the real story that's actually scripted now. Have fun. And final story of this week, because I had to make at least one more Pawtism joke or I'd explode. Walmart's store brand Dino Nuggies are, well, not being recalled because we don't have a functional food safety system in this country anymore, and they're not for sale anymore. Somehow magically protects those who bought the Nuggies unknowingly. Gods, I hate regulatory capture. Where was I? Right. Walmart Great Value brand dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets produced on February 10th, 2026, which means they'll have the expiration date of February 10th, 2027. Lot code 0416DPO1215 and establishment number P44164 contain lead. That's the only batch confirmed to contain high levels of lead, but to be clear, any lead in food products is dangerous, despite this weird new phrasing of dangerously high levels of lead, as though any amount is okay, much less good. Frankly, best to try another Dino Nuggie brand there, girls. Or, if you're flexible, you could probably adapt something like Alton Brown's fish stick recipe into significantly more sustainable fish nuggies with some dinosaur cookie cutters. But I'm also not one to mess with a girl's safe food. You know your body better, just be safe out there, y'all. My personal recommendations, avoid boar's head for everything, as they've had fairly regular E. coli and other foodborne illness issues for years. And I'd be particularly careful when grabbing anything frozen but ready-made. You know, well, like chicken nuggets, but the sort of things you can reheat in the microwave or similar, even if the intent is to reheat them in an oven. There's a whole slew of reasons why those are particularly vulnerable, but the simplest explanation I'm capable of giving is this. Ready-to-eat but frozen foods are assumed to have been pasteurized, raised to an internal temperature, usually 160 or 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which should kill nearly all foodborne pathogens, then flash frozen to be reheated by you in a process, at least on the instructions on the packaging, designed to achieve the best texture and flavor, assuming you have a microwave that matches up with the test one, but not to kill pathogens because it's assumed that that was done the first time. Trouble is, if that cooking wasn't done properly, a lot of foodborne illnesses, including many the Trump 2.0 administration no longer tests for or reports on, can survive the deep freeze just fine. A few can even grow in sub-freezing and anaerobic environments. Temperature can also play merry hell with some food safety systems, like metal detectors, especially if they're older ones. That's why I specifically don't eat certain things from the factory that I worked at, because a lot of those systems are real old. And that's before you get to the fact that the poultry industry is now allowed to use their own private inspectors instead of the FDA inspectors. That's not even a Trump thing, BT dubs, but a Biden-era development, albeit inspired by a Trump 1.0 project allowing the pork industry to do it first. Look, if you want to know more and probably never want to eat anything ever again, and add yet another reason to the list why you'll probably want to beat every capitalist to death with your bare hands, read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. That book inspired the first food safety laws in the United States in 1906, and while conditions have generally improved over the nearly a century and a quarter, the actual laws, and especially their enforcement, have generally not. In fact, since Reagan, regulations and enforcement have both massively slid backwards, accelerating particularly under Trump, both 1.0 and 2.0, and Biden. We're done, and it's only... that seems longer than the last one, and I was kind of proud about getting that last one shortish. Well, shorter. Oops. Well, I don't think I have a big outro this week. There won't be a schedule here, because, well, I haven't finished it yet at time of writing, and maybe I'll do it as a YouTube community post or something, especially since the day these shows come out on is sort of... well, it's Muttday, aka whatever the hell day I say it is. Oh, or you could join my Discord or follow me on Blue Sky, links in the description, to stay up to date and see yet more of my unhinged goblin energy. It's fairly consistent across most places, at least as much as I'm allowed to be. Ooh, I suppose I could tell you about the next few videos to expect. I've got one on the problems with modern mainline Pokemon ready to record, like just finished getting the script edited, and one on the Fortnitification of culture, which has been filmed but still needs to be video edited. What a weird difference. Whatever. And, I have a few stream highlights in the works as well, though those might take a little bit longer. The ambition of my editing plans tends to outstrip my current skill level, which does mean I keep improving, but so too does my ambition. Thank you all so very much for watching. As always, everything I do, written, streamed, videos, whatever, it's all brought to you by supporters like you for as little as $1 a month over on patreon.com/Phenn and coffee.com/Phenn. You can also find, again, my Discord and Blue Sky and all the other things down in the description, my Twitch channel too, since you're watching this on YouTube, and yeah. Anyway, I hope you all have a happy time zone, just whatever time you're seeing this. I feel silly always assuming morning, but... And thank you very much to my patrons, specifically April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Robin Autumn Marsh, Rose, Writer Princess, and Yalk. I quite literally could not do this without all of you. Thank you very much. I need to go correct my dog. Sorry. Okay, look, I'm probably going to use that clip because it was really good, but look, he's got an autoimmune disease that's slowly tearing up his it's tearing up his platelets and especially his ability for his blood to clot. And he's also now, I don't know if he scraped them when I wasn't looking, or if he's just given himself hot spots by licking them repeatedly, but he's got like scrapes on both of his knees, and he was trying to remove he was chewing at them, and there's a legitimate concern that he could bleed out from that. So yeah, having a terminal Autoimmune dog is a weird experience, it turns out. This is not the note that I wanted to end on. I'm gonna run away now, because I don't have an exit strategy beyond that bit. Bye?